He's been in the comedy scene for years, rapidly gaining a huge social following and touring all across the globe, the country, all the amazing things you've seen him on your screens, on your TV screens, on your phone screens, everywhere. He's everywhere. You guys, it's comedian John Crist joining me now via Zoom. How are you?
What's up, man? I'm stoked. My girlfriend's family lives in Northwest Arkansas. I can't
Okay.
wait to come back to Branson.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're excited to have you. So, John, something I'm
Yo,
curious to know here from kind of the jump is, as kids, we all kind of have this dream or this job that we say maybe jokingly or seriously that we're going to
yeah.
be when we grow up. For you, is that always a comedian, or how did this whole world kind of start for you?
Oh man. All right. Well, I want to be. If I said I could do anything, I'd probably be a NASCAR driver. Which judge as you want with that. But I would say, I think growing up in churches, my dad was a preacher, so I would always, I was one of eight kids, and that probably helps. There's a lot of you're gonna need to compete for attention in a situation like I grew up in. So I remember kind of, and if you know any of my comedy, this is pretty much observational, is what it is. I remember seeing, like, going to the church service, and then I would hear about the church service from, people that work there or my dad, or you kind of see the behind the scenes, and you just go, and well, that doesn't line up with that. And then it takes the same thing with, your fan. Where I remember growing up, there was a Christian mom that, like, lived down the street, but then when she would get mad at us and playing in the backyard, she would scream and cuss at us. And you go, well, you said you were, well, that doesn't, you know what I'm saying? So, and then you obviously got corporations these days and politics, and you go, well, that doesn't line up with that. And then that's in essence all comedy is. So I would say I probably backed into it. I probably backed into the job of being a comic, but I didn't know if I could make quite money doing it, but I was always like pointing that kind of stuff out, even back in college and even before any of this.
Yeah, so safe to say you've been like a lifelong observationist, and then that just happened to bode well for you when it came to the comedy
Yeah,
aspect of
yeah.
this all.
There you
Yes,
go.
yes.
That's a good way to say
Now,
it.
I would kind of, define you, especially in nowadays, as more of like a clean comedian per se. So, how would
Yep.
you go about kind of deciding to make that decision and then also staying within that realm given kind of where we're at in the world of comedy now?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think any comic. I mean, I remember I called my brother a fool growing up, and my mom washed my mouth out with soap. So I just grew up where you didn't swear, you didn't say, you just didn't talk like that in my house. I remember I went to the comedy club for the first time, and I remember a guy swearing. And I kind of looked around like, is he in trouble for that? Or like, who's in charge? Is he going to get kicked out? And they're like, no, you can swear here. And I was like, what?
You're like, where's the
That's just
soap?
how, yeah, yeah, literally. That's just how I grew up. So I don't think it wasn't a conscious decision. And I say a comic who is dirty and is trying to be clean, that comedy sounds terrible also. And a comic is clean that, is trying to be dirty, that comedy is terrible too. I think you just want a comic to be authentic to himself. So sometimes you got a guy that's from Los Angeles. I'm like, dude, don't try to be Southern. Don't try to be a redneck. You're not that. Or sometimes you got a guy that is a redneck, and you're like, dude, don't try to be like a hardened New York City guy. It's not. I don't think it has anything to do with swearing or not swearing. It's just like, dude, I grew up like vacationing in places like Silver Dollar City, Gatlinburg. Like, I can make jokes about that stuff because that's the kind of childhood I have, and that's why it's resonated with so many people.
Yeah, well, and I think that authenticity key is super, super important because I think that's something we so often with a lot of these comedians, right? Is a lot of them are very showy or doing something for the social kind of
Oh
viral
yeah.
moment, if you will, if you know what I'm saying. So
Oh yeah.
I am curious though, as you said, a lot of your stuff's kind of inspired by life experience or observations or whatever. But is there other comedians that maybe inspired you growing up or even inspire you now that within your craft and kind of to keep going?
Oh man, I mean, growing up, I remember watching Brian Regan. I remember watching Tim Hawkins. I remember watching the Kings of Comedy, Cedric the Entertainer. I made a conscious decision to start doing stand-up comedy after I saw The Pimp Chronicles by Cat Williams in 2008. I was like, this is unbelievable, man, and that's what made me kind of head in that direction. A lot of those modern day comics, they're like joking, obviously, but they're dead serious. They're dead. They're almost kind of a way in like like a preacher outside of the obviously the swearing and the sexual humor. The preacher is like he's telling you things that you need to hear, and he's telling kind of warnings about society. And Cat Williams, a lot of his early stuff was like a modern day critique on the hypocrisies of culture. And I was like, this guy is speaking the truth. And I think now Nate Bargatze obviously is a friend of mine here from Nashville. Leanne Morgan. You got a guy like Theo Vaughn, who I think is wildly authentic to himself and his personality. Andrew Santino, Andrew Schultz. So many different. It used to be in comedy, you'd have the Jerry Seinfelds and the Jay Lenos that were for everybody, and you didn't have a choice. You just had to go there. Now, if you're black, white, rich, poor, southern, downtown, gay, straight, but everybody has a comedian for them, which I think is amazing. Like I live right next to Zany's in Nashville. There's a week. There's at least 2 shows a night. So probably there's 20 comedy shows a week. And it used to be you just go to the club. You didn't look up who was there. You just went. And now everybody with everybody's podcast. And look at a guy like me has my own quite follow. Like if I walk through the airport, 9 people out of 10 are like, "Who's that guy?" But the one person like sees me and starts crying, and they're like, "Oh my god, this is my guy," because that person sees me every single day. So celebrity or fame or whatever you want to call it is very, instead of the Tonight Show having the whole pie, there's like 5,000 Tonight shows that have a little piece of it, and it's very segmented like that. But the fans, my goodness, are so loyal, dude, because they know you, and they don't want to just come to Branson to go to a comedy show. So if you ever driven down that strip, there's 1,000 shows. They go, we want to see John. He's our guy.
It is interesting how you mentioned how it's become so individualized. 'Cause I think that is like super true for the way, especially the comedy industry is now.
Yep.
So I don't know. That's not something I've thought about before, but I enjoyed hearing that. So
Yeah.
you've got this brand new special out called Emotional Support that's now out on YouTube. So I'm always curious to know from comedians, what was it like for you specifically kind of crafting this special together? And then also, what does it
Yeah.
mean to you to put a special together?
Man, well, you kind of start from square one, and you go, what do I want to do? You look at a blank piece of paper and you go, what do I want to talk about? Best comic said, write what you know about, right? So what I'm going through currently now, I have a girlfriend. I'm not married yet, but I have a girlfriend. Uh, Going down that road, I'm an uncle. Like I do a lot of things with my young nieces and nephews. My family group chat coming out of a political season was very polarizing. A lot of people on both sides. Uh, and there's these things where you go, man, I want to talk about these things now because I can't talk about them in the next special. Like when I started, I was talking about going to youth group and like funny things at my church, and I just that's not. I still go to church, but those things aren't on the top of my, that's not what I think about anymore, And then you got like a lot. We live in Nashville, a lot of country music, a lot of, kind of redneck type activities, a lot of conspiracy theories. That's been like making fun of those has been fun. But then let's say in 5 years where I'm married and I do have a child and my parents are getting older and that's a different special. So I think every artist where you go, well, when Morgan Wallen started, he was talking about getting drunk and partying on Broadway. Now he has a child, and then people get older, they pay a lot more money into the, I think the tax system, and they care more about politics, about the way that their neighborhood is going, about the way that their city is being run, about the world. So you kind of grow and no, I've heard it said that a comic can't be truly prolific before the age of 40 because let's say I started at 25, I just turned 40. You don't have enough, like a great NBA player can be great at 25, 26. As a comic, at the beginning you're just talking about random funny stuff, and then you start to be like, wait, I care about this. Then and still obviously you got to lead with humor. It's got to be funny. And then you go, wait, well, I do have this opinion on Elon Musk, or I do have and if it's funny, I do have an opinion. I mean, on a lot of these social issues that you're like, oh, I would like to contribute to this. I would like to, and then so your comedy does change over time, and some of the best comics are when they were later in their lives, and they're in their 40s.
I like this idea of kind of like what you're saying, like maintaining relevancy within your own life, right? Like
With what
talk,
you do, yeah,
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 like
yeah,
talking about what's appropriate for where you're at in your current state. Because I think that is super
yeah,
true. And sometimes we see it's like content or jokes that are being used are like almost no longer relevant to the person, and it just feels
yeah.
weird, feels kind of icky. So I think that actually
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
country music is the kind of the same where like the
Yeah,
guys from the 90s playing those like funny jingles and
yeah,
they're still making them and they're like, why doesn't this work anymore? I was
yeah,
like, because it worked. I was like, well, we've grown.
right.
So you think about like my Nate Bargatze's a good example. Like my fan base when I was like there's a comic I won't mention his name here, but when he was huge, selling out arenas when he was in his 20s, talking about doing drugs and going to colleges and hooking up with girls, right? So, and he's still doing those jokes, but now he's 50. And think about the people who liked those when they were in their 20s. They have mortgages now. So they're like, no, we don't. We liked it then. We don't, and he can't sell 10 tickets now because he's like, why don't, it's like, well, you're 50 talking about some adolescent behavior. It's not, the people that liked you then now have children in high school and they're like, I don't, you know what I'm saying? So I think
Well,
it's
it goes
something
back
that is a,
to, yeah, it goes back to what you were saying a second ago of like we all have our own comics, right? Like we all have our
yeah,
own person we're looking for, and so it's like that person
yeah,
is no longer beneficial to us because again, relevancy.
yeah,
It's not relevant to my
and
life
yeah,
anymore. Yeah,
unless you grow with him.
right. Yes, which is so
And then
interesting.
very interesting, but you will change if you're
Yeah,
a fan. You
yeah.
will change. So the comic kind of has to change.
Mm-hmm.
Now he can still be himself, right? You can still be Sebastian Maniscalco, great example. He was always Italian, always from New York City. When he was younger, talking about the stresses of working as a waiter. Now he's got two kids. He hasn't. He's different. He's still himself, but he's changed what he. And it's kind of like an adapt or die type thing, really.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love everything you're saying here. So,
I don't know why I'm starting to sound like I'm
no,
teaching a course or
you
something.
know what? And
Yeah.
I'm all ears, so I'm taking it
Listen up,
all
yeah.
in. This is great. Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
perfect. So you mentioned Branson a few times. You're currently on tour with the Jokes for Humans tour. Wanted to make
You
sure I
got
got
it.
that right there. So you're going to be
You
at the
got it.
Star Hall on March 7th. So tell us, for obviously people have been following you for a long time. So if they want to see you, they probably kind of know what they're in for here. But what can they expect from this live show from you?
Oh, well, the live show's fun because I think we adapted the Jokes for Humans. The idea that there's a lot of AI now, and there's a lot of Chat GPT, and you go to Stagecoach, and somebody comes out as a hologram, and a lot of people in the industry are like, well, maybe live comedy's going away. Maybe we're not going to do it anymore. Maybe it's going to be replaced by, you can just go to Chat GPT and you're like, write a John Crist joke, and it'll do it. And the idea was like, yeah, but we all started comedy sitting on the back porch at the frat house, cutting up with our buddies. And kind of the vision of the tour was like, hey, how about I just come to Branson, see if anybody wants to come hang out, and we'll just do it live. And that's what it is. Like everybody, especially when you get on the internet, everybody's kind of the one thing that's amazing about the live show is everybody's on the internet. Everybody's kind of segmented into their own groups. When you go to Branson and everybody comes out together, it feels so good because you're like, oh, these are all like my neighbors and people that I live around. We all think this. I thought I was the only one, or I thought I was isolated, especially during like COVID and all that, when everybody's just kind of had to be by themselves. And you get, oh, a lot of people think like me. And my agent comes to the shows all the time and he goes, man, I just love being in the lobby after your shows because it's so light. People feel there's so much joy, and people feel like everybody's got problems and issues in life, and it just feels like everybody a little bit has a bounce in their step, and that's what the show's all about.
that sense of community as well, I think is so
Yep,
big. You know, like you
for
said,
sure.
people that love you or just love what you're saying, and then maybe they're finding someone that, you know, they didn't know that liked you as well. So I think
Yeah,
that's super special. Now,
and
also my final question for you. So, you know, you've done so much. You've been around, you said 15 years. Like I said, you've been big on social, you've got specials, people know you, but you're only 40, so there's still plenty of time. So,
gas me up, dude.
what else are you hoping to maybe kind of venture into, tap into, still hoping to achieve? Anything on the docket for the year and the coming years that you can kind of tease for me here?
Yeah, well, so we have a travel show that we are in the middle of production on. It's called John Crist's America, and I really, honestly, it's funny that we're coming to Branson because I literally go to cities like Branson and go to dirt track NASCAR races and go to barrel races and various. I would say easiest way to describe it is like competitions that are at local state fairs or circuses and stuff like that. I just go to all of them, and I go, man, have you ever been to like the ski jorking competition in Utah where you ski behind a horse? And you're like, there's thousands of them. Where there was a last week in Talladega there was a Nissan Altima track race, 300 Nissan Altimas. It was like the most hillbilly redneck activity. And then like there's dude, I'm telling you, there's things in Branson that you go, if you had never been there, you would drive down that strip and go, what on earth? This is the wildest thing I've ever seen. And it's basically going to cities like that and just getting taken a part of uh the local vibe. But it's interesting because when I made jokes about church, some people are like, I can't believe he said this about church. And everybody goes, no, his dad's a preacher. He grew up, he's one of us. So same with NASCAR. I go to 10 NASCAR races a year. I make a fun of a lot of things NASCAR related, but everybody goes, no, no, no. He's with us. He's our guy. And there's a lot of comedy these days is kind of pointing the finger at other groups. So look at them. Look at their weird and I'm not trying to expose anybody or exploit anybody. I'm just going to have a good time. And that show should be coming in the fall.
Ooh, okay. Well, I'm excited to see what that's all
Hey,
about. It sounds like
you
a
heard it here
good time.
first.
I know, seriously,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
exclusive. No, I'm just kidding. But all right, well, John, thank you so much for your time and taking the time to chat with me. You got lots of good stuff on the docket. Like I said, you'll be in Branson at the Star Hall. Don't miss it. Get your tickets now. Thanks for the chat.